My name is Paisley, and if you were to look at my life from the outside, you'd probably see a woman who has it all. I'm the founder and CEO of the Glasshouse, a luxury event venue nestled in the heart of the Bay Area. It's a sprawling estate, all glass walls and manicured gardens, the kind of place that hosts million-dollar weddings and corporate galas for Silicon Valley's elite. Last year, Forbes listed us among the top 5 most valuable private venues in California, and our latest valuation came in at a staggering $120 million. I built this from the ground up, starting with nothing but a rundown warehouse and a vision. People call me self-made, and I suppose that's true, though the cost of that title is something few ever see. But at home in the tangled web of my husband's family, none of that seems to matter. In the Henderson family, I'm not Paisley the entrepreneur, or even Paisley the generous host. I'm just the outsider who married their golden boy Michael. My mother-in-law Evelyn never lets me forget it. She's the matriarch, sharp-tongued and immaculately dressed, the kind of woman who can silence a room with a single look. To her, I am always Michael's wife, never her own person, never quite enough. Family gatherings are a tradition in the Hendersons. Every Thanksgiving, Christmas, and even the odd summer barbecue is a grand affair, and I've always been the one to organize them. I book the venue, my venue naturally, plan the menus, arrange the flowers, and foot the bill. The family never seems to notice the work or the money. They just show up, eat, and leave as if these things appear by magic. Evelyn will compliment the roast or the centerpiece, but never me. She saves her praise for my sister-in-law Rachel. Rachel is everything I'm not, at least in Evelyn's eyes. She's a stay-at-home mom with 3 kids, always baking something or knitting little hats for the church charity drive. At every gathering, Evelyn will say things like, "Rachel's pies are just like my mother's," or "No one sets a table like Rachel." Once when I mentioned a new corporate client who'd booked the venue for $500,000, Evelyn just smiled and said, "That's nice, dear." But have you tasted Rachel's apple crumble? It's as if my achievements are invisible, or worse, irrelevant. I remember one dinner in particular a few years ago. The whole family was there, laughter bouncing off the high ceilings, wine glasses clinking. I was clearing plates when Evelyn turned to me and said, her voice sweet as honey, but her eyes cold, "Some people just don't understand the meaning of family." She didn't have to say my name. The words hung in the air, heavy and sharp. I felt my face flush, the sting of humiliation settling in my chest. No one spoke up for me, not even Michael. Sometimes I wonder if my success is a threat to them, or if it's just me they can't accept. I've tried to fit in to be what they want, a good wife, a generous host, a quiet supporter. But no matter what I do, it's never enough. I'm always on the outside looking in, the girl with the glass house, watching a family that still sees me as a stranger. And the truth is, I'm tired of trying. Tired of pretending it doesn't hurt. Tired of being the one who gives and gives only to be told I don't understand what family means. The crisis that changed everything didn't come quietly. It crashed into my life on a Saturday in late September, at the wedding of my older brother Thomas. I'd spent months helping to plan the event, negotiating with vendors, securing the best caterers, and of course offering my own venue at a deep discount. Thomas and his fiancée Julia had insisted on inviting over 350 guests, and the final budget for the wedding came to just over $420,000. I covered nearly half of that myself, writing checks for the flowers, the open bar, even the custom ice sculpture Julia wanted for the cocktail hour. I told myself I was doing it for family, that this was what sisters do. But deep down I wanted to feel included, to be seen. The morning of the wedding, I arrived early to oversee the final touches. The ballroom shimmered with candlelight and white orchids, the tables set with gold-rimmed china. My staff moved quietly around me, respectful and efficient. Julia's mother fluttered in and out, fussing over seating charts and place cards. I tried to stay out of her way, but she kept glancing at me, her lips pressed tight. It wasn't until the rehearsal that I realized something was wrong. As the wedding party lined up for the processional, Julia waved me aside. "Paisley, can we talk?" she said, her voice low but urgent. We stepped into a side room, away from the laughter and music. "I wanted to thank you for everything you've done," Julia began, her tone oddly formal. "But I need to ask you not to sit at the family table tonight. We have some important guests from Thomas's company, and there just isn't room." For a moment I couldn't speak. I stared at her, searching her face for some hint of a joke. "You're asking me to give up my seat at my own brother's wedding?" Julia's eyes flickered. It's not personal. You understand, right? We just need to make a good impression. And, well, some people feel you tend to make things about yourself. It's Thomas's day. I felt the blood drain from my face. I've paid for half this wedding. I spent weeks organizing every detail. What else do you want from me? She shrugged, almost apologetic. We're grateful, but this isn't about money. I left the room in a daze, the sounds of celebration suddenly muffled as if I were underwater. I found Thomas near the bar laughing with his friends. When I told him what Julia had said, he just sighed. Paisley, please. Don't make a scene. Julia's stressed. Just let her have this. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. I spent the rest of the evening at a table near the kitchen, surrounded by distant cousins and plus ones I barely knew. Every time I looked toward the head table, I saw Julia's friends and Thomas's business partners raising their glasses, toasting a future I was apparently not part of. Later that night, as the party wound down, I overheard Julia talking to her bridesmaids. Paisley's generous, but she always has to be the center of attention. I'm glad Evelyn convinced Thomas to keep her out of the spotlight. The words hit me like a slap. I turned away before anyone could see the tears in my eyes. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a group text from Evelyn. Thank you to everyone who made last night so special. Family is everything. Then a separate message. This year, Paisley will not be joining us for Thanksgiving. Family only. I stared at the screen, numb. I later learned from Rachel that Evelyn had told everyone I was too busy for family and needed to focus on my business. The narrative was already spreading. Paisley, the workaholic, too important for her own kin. That afternoon, I logged into my venue's booking system almost on autopilot. There in the main ballroom calendar was a reservation for the Henderson family Thanksgiving made under Evelyn's maiden name. The deposit, $10,000, had already cleared. I sat back in my chair, a hollow ache settling in my chest. I remembered the $2 million I'd lent to my brother-in-law last year, money he'd begged for to save his failing startup. He'd never paid me back, never even thanked me. No one had. I thought of the countless holidays I'd hosted, the hundreds of thousands I'd spent, the hours I'd poured into making everything perfect. And now I was being erased from my own family's story. The realization was sharp and cold. I had always believed that if I just gave enough time, money, love, I would finally belong. But now, sitting alone in my office, I saw the truth. I was only ever the means to an end. And for the first time, I wasn't sure I wanted to keep paying the price. The hours after Evelyn's text blurred into a haze of numbness. I sat in my office at the Glasshouse, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the $120 million valuation certificate framed on the wall. The numbers glinted mockingly in the light. $120 million. A figure that had once filled me with pride now felt like a hollow monument to everything I'd sacrificed. My fingers traced the edge of my desk, cold and unyielding, as the truth settled like a stone in my gut. They don't see me. They never did. I didn't cry. Not then. Instead, I cycled through emotions like season's anger, hot enough to scorch humiliation, sticky and suffocating disbelief, sharp as shattered glass. My phone buzzed repeatedly, a flurry of family texts in the group chat, jokes about pumpkin pie recipes and football rivalries, as if Evelyn's announcement had been nothing more than a minor scheduling note. No one questioned her. No one defended me. After all these years, was I just the wallet? The thought clawed at me. I stood abruptly, pacing the length of the office, my heels clicking against the polished concrete floor. Memories flickered unbidden. 3 years earlier, at Rachel's 40th birthday party, I'd transformed the Glasshouse into a Parisian courtyard, complete with a replica Eiffel Tower and a live jazz band. The cost, $85,000. Evelyn had hugged Rachel at the end of the night, tears in her eyes. You've always been the heart of this family, she'd said. I'd stood nearby holding a stack of dirty plates, my silk blouse stained with champagne. No one noticed when I slipped out early. 6 months ago, in my brother-in-law's cramped startup office, Mark had begged me for a loan, his voice cracking. $2 million, Paisley. Just $2 million. The investors pulled out, and if I don't cover payroll, I'd handed him the check against my accountant's advice. Family doesn't keep score, I'd said. He'd never mentioned it again. Now staring at the Thanksgiving reservation under Evelyn's maiden name, her family name, not mine, I felt the weight of every unspoken slight, every unpaid debt. My hands trembled as I opened the venue's financial records. Over 15 years, I'd spent $125 million hosting their gatherings. $75,000 per year tax deductible, but dignity isn't a write-off. A knock at the door startled me. Diego, my operations manager, peered in. "Everything okay, Ms. Paisley? The Henderson event next week. Should we proceed with the usual premium package?" I hesitated. The usual meant caviar appetizers, vintage champagne, a 7-tier cake all comped. My throat tightened. "Change the contact name on the booking," I said, my voice eerily calm. "Direct all inquiries to Evelyn Henderson. And don't mention my involvement." Diego's brow furrowed. "But you're the owner." "Not to them." When he left, I sank into my chair, gripping the arms until my knuckles turned white. What am I doing? This wasn't me. I'd always been the fixer, the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over. But the image of Julia's smug smile at the wedding, Evelyn's dismissive text it, played on a loop, corrosive and unrelenting. 2 days after the wedding, I'd found Michael in the garage tinkering with his vintage Mustang. "Did you know?" I'd asked. He wouldn't meet my eyes. Mom thought it would be less complicated this way. He'd reached for me, but I'd stepped back. Complicated. My laugh sounded broken. "I'm your wife. You're always so busy," he'd said quietly. Maybe she's right. Maybe you need to focus on what matters. Now alone in my office, I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and pulled out a leather-bound checkbook, its pages filled with records of gifts, loans, and donations. $20,000 for Rachel's daughter's medical bills. $150,000 to renovate Evelyn's kitchen. $500 monthly donations to the family's church in my name, though I hadn't stepped foot in it since our wedding. I flipped to the most recent entry, $420,000. Thomas and Julia wedding. The numbers blurred. Why did I keep doing this? The answer whispered back, shameful and small, because I thought if I gave enough, they'd finally love me. But love shouldn't require bankruptcy of the soul. My phone lit up with a call from Rachel. I let it go to voicemail. Seconds later, her message played aloud. "Hey Paisley, Mom said you're skipping Thanksgiving. Look, I know she can be harsh, but family is family. Don't let pride ruin everything." Pride. The word ignited something in me. I stood, walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, and watched the sunset bleed into the bay. Below, couples arrived for a wedding rehearsal, laughing and clinging to each other. I pressed my palm against the glass, cold and unyielding. "Is this what you want?" I whispered to my reflection. "To keep funding your own erasure?" The answer came not in words, but in a memory. Age 14, in a foster home outside Sacramento. I'd saved $387 from babysitting to buy a used laptop, hiding the cash in a coffee can under my bed. When the money vanished, the foster mom shrugged. Things disappear. That's life. I'd vowed then to build something no one could take a life where I mattered. Now 30 years later, I was still that girl clutching her coffee can, waiting for someone to see her. I returned to my desk and drafted 2 emails. The first was to my accountant: freeze all personal donations and loans to the Henderson family, effective immediately. The second was to Diego: cancel the premium package for the Henderson Thanksgiving. Charge full price $125,000 with a 50% non-refundable deposit due today. I hovered over the send button, my breath shallow. This will blow up the family. Burn every bridge. But another voice, quieter and fiercer, replied, "You've been burning yourself to keep them warm for decades." I clicked send. Then I did something I hadn't allowed myself in years. I shut down my computer, left the office, and drove to the coast. At Land's End, I stood on the cliffs, the wind screaming in my ears, and finally let the tears come. They were hot and angry, scouring away the numbness. What if they never forgive me? The question hung in the salt air, but for the first time another followed. What if I never forgive myself for letting it go this far? When my phone buzzed with Evelyn's caller ID, I silenced it and watched the waves crash against the rocks below. The answer, I realized, wasn't in their approval. It was in the choice to stop asking for it. The day of the Henderson Thanksgiving banquet arrived with a biting coastal chill, the kind that seeps into bones and sharpens tempers. I'd told myself I wouldn't go. For weeks I'd rehearsed scenarios of quiet rebellion, a spa day in Napa, a solo trip to Paris, anything to avoid the gravitational pull of family obligation. But by 10 a.m., I found myself driving to the Glasshouse, my hands steady on the wheel, my chest tight with a mix of dread and morbid curiosity. Just a routine check, I lied to myself. No one needs to know I'm here. I entered through the service door, avoiding the main lobby. The staff nodded discreetly, accustomed to my unannounced visits. The scent of rosemary and roasted turkey wafted from the kitchen, mingling with the acidic tang of my anxiety. I lingered in the hallway outside the grand ballroom, listening to the familiar clatter of silverware and the low hum of my event team preparing for the 150 guests. Then I heard it. Evelyn's voice, razor-sharp and commanding, slicing through the ambient noise. "This is unacceptable," she snapped. "I specifically requested fresh cranberries, not this canned slop. And where are the lobster tails?" The menu clearly stated surf and turf. I peered through the slightly ajar door. Evelyn stood at the head of a linen-draped table, her designer burgundy suit immaculate, her finger jabbing at a printed menu. Diego, my manager, faced her with his usual calm, though I noticed the subtle clench of his jaw. "My apologies, Mrs. Henderson," he said. "The contract you signed specifies a traditional turkey dinner. Upgrading to lobster tails would incur an additional $20,000 fee." Evelyn's laugh was icy. "Don't be ridiculous. Do you know who we are? My daughter-in-law has hosted here for years. Tell your owner we expect the upgrades complimentary." Diego's eyes flickered toward the door where I stood hidden. "I'll need to consult the owner for any changes." "Consult them then," Evelyn snapped, tossing her napkin onto the table. "But hurry. Our guests arrive in 2 hours, and I won't tolerate mediocrity." I stepped into the room before I could second-guess myself. The air shifted, a collective inhale from the staff, the rustle of Evelyn spinning to face me. Diego straightened, relief flashing across his face. "Ms. Paisley?" I was just explaining the menu policy to Mrs. Henderson. Evelyn's porcelain complexion paled. "Ms. Paisley." I kept my gaze steady, my voice cool and clear. "As the owner, I approve all changes. Is there a problem, Evelyn?" The room froze. Evelyn's perfectly penciled eyebrows shot upward. Behind her, Rachel dropped a wine glass. It shattered against the floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. You own this place," Evelyn whispered. "Since 2010, I said, crossing my arms. I built it after Michael and I married. Funny, I assumed you knew, given how often you've used it." A choked noise escaped Rachel. "But all those years? The weddings? The reunions? You never said—" "Why would I cut in? You never asked." Evelyn recovered quickly, her cheeks flushing. "Paisley, this is a misunderstanding. We're family. Surely you don't expect us to pay full price." Diego cleared his throat. "Actually, Mrs. Henderson, your balance is $125,000. The deposit paid only covers the base package." The number hung in the air, brutal and unyielding. Mark, my brother-in-law, shot up from his chair. $125,000. "That's insane, Paisley. Tell them this is a mistake." I met his gaze, the memory of his unpaid $2 million loan sharp in my mind. "No mistake. The Glasshouse is a business, not a charity." Evelyn stepped forward, her composure cracking. "You'd really charge your own family after everything we've done for you." A bitter laugh escaped me. "What exactly have you done?" Evelyn criticized my table settings, taken credit for my work. Or was it the $1.2 million I've spent over the years so you could play matriarch at my expense? The room erupted. $1.2 million, Thomas exploded. "That's impossible." I pulled a folded spreadsheet from my blazer. Months of late-night accounting, every cent itemized. $75,000 annually for 15 years. Catering upgrades, floral arrangements, valet services, all comped. Not to mention the $2 million loan to Mark or the $85,000 for Rachel's birthday. I tossed the paper onto the table. "You're welcome to audit it." Silence. Michael, who'd lingered near the back, finally spoke. "Paisley, why didn't you tell me?" The hurt in his voice almost undid me. Almost. "You never noticed," I said softly. "None of you did." Evelyn rallied, her voice trembling with faux warmth. "Darling, let's discuss this privately. We're family. Surely we can—" "No." The word came out steady, final. "You made it clear I'm not family. So let's treat this as what it is, business. I turned to Diego. Process their payment. No further changes unless they cover the fees up front. As I walked out, Evelyn's composure shattered. You'll regret this, who do you think you are? I paused at the door, glancing back. The woman who built the house you've been taking for granted. Enjoy the turkey, Evelyn. It's complimentary. The ballroom doors swung shut behind me. I didn't look back. Epilogue. In the lobby, I leaned against a marble pillar, my knees shaking. Distant laughter spilled from the kitchen, my staff oblivious to the earthquake upstairs. Through the glass walls, I watched the first guests arrive, aunts in fur stoles, uncles clutching bourbon flasks, cousins texting furiously. They'd all know within minutes. A hand touched my shoulder. Michael stood beside me, his eyes red-rimmed. I'm sorry, he said hoarsely. I didn't realize. I studied him, the man I'd loved for 18 years, now a stranger in a tailored suit. You didn't want to, I said quietly. He flinched. Can we fix this? The question lingered heavy with hope and grief. I looked past him to the valet parking my Tesla beside Evelyn's Rolls-Royce. I don't know, I said truthfully, but I won't pay to be invisible anymore. As I walked away, the sunset painted the sky in furious shades of orange and purple, a storm brewing, or maybe a beginning. The silence in the ballroom was deafening. Evelyn's hand trembled as she gripped the edge of the table, her composure cracking like fine china. Paisley, she began, forcing a laugh that rang hollow. You know I was just joking about the invitation. Of course you're family. I didn't blink. Family doesn't cost $1.2 million, Evelyn. The number hung in the air, a guillotine blade. Around the table, faces shifted. Rachel's cheeks flushed with shame. Mark's jaw clenched in defiance, Thomas staring at his hands. Only Michael met my gaze, his eyes wide with a mix of guilt and dawning understanding. Evelyn rallied, her voice saccharine. Darling, let's not be dramatic. We've always appreciated your contributions. Contributions. I repeated, cold laughter escaping me. Is that what you call the $2 million I lent Mark's failing startup? Or the $420,000 for Thomas's wedding? I turned to my brother-in-law, who paled. How's that blockchain app doing, by the way? The one that revolutionized supply chain management until the SEC investigation. Mark shot up his chair, screeching. That's private? So was my money, I said quietly, until you made it yours. Evelyn slammed her palm on the table. Enough, this is Thanksgiving. We're here to celebrate, not air dirty laundry. No, I said, my voice steady. You're here to celebrate. I'm here to set terms. I nodded to Diego, who placed a contract on the table. From now on, any Henderson event at the Glasshouse will be billed at full price. No discounts, no favors, and all outstanding debts. I glanced at Mark. Will be repaid within 90 days with interest. The room erupted. You can't do this, Thomas barked. We're blood. Blood didn't pay for your daughter's college fund, I shot back. I did. $150,000 wired last January. Check your statements. Rachel gasped. You said that was from Grandma's trust. Thomas avoided her stare. Evelyn's mask slipped entirely. You're tearing this family apart. No, I said, leaning forward. You did that when you decided my value was only in my wallet. Michael stood abruptly, his chair toppling. All eyes turned to him. For a moment I feared he'd side with them, the golden boy, the peacekeeper. But he walked to my side instead, his hand finding mine. Paisley's right, he said, voice trembling. We've taken her for granted. I've taken her for granted. Evelyn's face contorted. Michael, don't be foolish. She's manipulating you. Mom, stop. His grip tightened on my hand. I've watched her cry after every holiday. I've seen the spreadsheets. I just didn't want to rock the boat. The admission hung in the air, raw and uncomfortable. Evelyn switched tactics, her tone softening. Paisley, please. Let's discuss this privately. We'll make it right. I studied her. The perfectly highlighted hair, the Botox-smoothed frown lines, the diamond bracelet I'd gifted her last Christmas. There's nothing to discuss. The terms are non-negotiable. Non-negotiable, Mark sneered. Who do you think you are? I met his glare. the owner of the venue hosting your wife's 40th birthday next month, unless you'd prefer to plan it elsewhere." His bravado crumpled. The event was already trending on Instagram, a $200 Gatsby glam theme. Evelyn stood clutching her pearls. "You'd really bankrupt your own family." "Bankrupt," I laughed. "You have 6 months to repay the loans. If you can't manage that with your trust funds and vacation homes, maybe you're the ones who need financial advice." The barb hit its mark. Evelyn's trust, a modest $5 million inheritance from her father, had been drained by bad investments years ago, a secret I'd kept at Michael's request. Rachel began to cry. "Paisley, I'm sorry, I didn't know." "You didn't ask," I said not unkindly. "None of you did." For the first time, Evelyn looked small. "What do you want from us?" The question hung in the air. "Nothing," I said finally. "Not anymore." I turned to leave Michael following, but Evelyn's voice stopped me. "If you walk out that door, don't expect to come back." I paused, my back to them. I stopped waiting for an invitation years ago. Later in the parking lot, Michael stared at the ground. "They'll never forgive me for this." "They'll never forgive me," I corrected. "You're just collateral damage." He winced. "Why didn't you tell me how much it hurt?" I thought of 1,000 sleepless nights of bank statements hidden in locked drawers of toast where my name was never mentioned. I thought love meant silence. He reached for me, then pulled back. "What now?" I looked at the glass house, its windows glowing like a lantern in the dark. Now I stopped paying to be invisible. As we drove away, I watched the rearview mirror. Through the ballroom windows, I saw Evelyn slumped in her chair, the family arguing over contracts and credit limits. Rachel dabbed her eyes with a napkin. Thomas scrolled through his phone, likely checking his dwindling accounts. For the first time, I felt free. Not because I'd won, but because I'd finally set the price. Not just for the venue, but for my own worth. Michael's hand found mine again. "I'm sorry it took me so long." I squeezed back. "Me too." The road ahead was unlit, uncertain. But for once I wasn't footing the bill for someone else's happiness. I left the Thanksgiving banquet before dessert was served. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman who'd orchestrated every course for 15 years wouldn't taste the pecan pie she'd personally sourced from Georgia. The ballroom doors clicked shut behind me, muffling the strained laughter and clinking glasses. I wandered into the empty jade room, a smaller hall I'd designed for intimate weddings, its walls draped in emerald silk that shimmered like a forest at dawn. My reflection flickered in the floor-to-ceiling mirrors, a ghost in a black pantsuit untethered. The silence was a living thing here, thick and velvet soft. I traced a finger along the grand piano, its lid closed for the night. How many times had I played the hostess in this room? I'd smiled through toasts for marriages that later crumbled, laughed at jokes that mocked my childlessness, applauded achievements funded by my quiet checks. Always present, never seen. A memory surfaced unbidden. 5 years ago, Christmas Eve. I'd stayed late to fix a heating issue in the ballroom, my hands numb from adjusting valves. When I arrived at Michael's childhood home, the family was already exchanging gifts. Evelyn handed me a hastily wrapped candle. "For your office," she'd said. Across the room, Rachel unwrapped a diamond pendant, tears in her eyes. "It's Grandma's," she'd gasped. I'd stared at my $12 soy candle, its scent labeled peaceful pine, and wondered if irony was genetic. Now peace felt less like a scent and more like a reckoning. I slipped off my heels, the marble floor cold beneath my feet, and walked to the center of the room. Above me, a chandelier dripped crystal teardrops, casting fractured light over the emptiness. This is what freedom looks like, I thought. Not triumph, not fireworks, just space to breathe, to exist without the weight of expectation. Michael found me there. He hovered in the doorway. His tie loosened a slice of pecan pie on a china plate. "They're asking for you," he said, though we both knew it was a lie. I shook my head. "Let them ask the manager." He set the plate on the piano uneaten. "Where do we go from here?" The question echoed. For years we had meant the Hendersons, their traditions, their needs, their unspoken rules. Now it was just us two people who'd loved each other once before. The ledger of resentments grew too heavy. "I don't know," I said, "but I won't shrink myself to fit their world anymore." He nodded, eyes glistening, and left the pie behind. The next morning I returned to the glass house at dawn. The staff had cleared the Henderson event, leaving no trace of their presence, no confetti, no wine stains, no lingering scent of Evelyn's Chanel No. 5. In the accounting office, I opened the safe and pulled out the first dollar I'd ever earned here, framed and yellowed. $250 paid in cash by a couple who'd trusted me with their vows when this was still a warehouse with exposed beams and a leaky roof. Diego found me there. The Hendersons' payment cleared, he said. $125,000. Mark wired the first loan repayment to $500,000. He included a note. I'll have the rest by Q1. Please don't tell Mom. I crumpled the note and tossed it into the shredder. Send him a receipt. No personal messages. As Diego left, I pressed my palm to the framed dollar, its glass cool against my skin. This was my legacy. Not the Hendersons' approval, not their guilt-ridden repayments, but this a crumbling bill that represented every risk I'd taken, every dream I'd refused to surrender. Now, as I write this, the autumn sun slants through my home office window, gilding the files of unpaid family loans and event invoices I've finally marked closed. The Glasshouse thrives, hosting strangers' celebrations, quinceañeras, anniversaries, retirement parties. Each event a testament to lives lived boldly without apology. Evelyn sends Christmas cards still addressed only to Michael. Rachel texts occasionally vague promises of coffee that never materialize. Mark avoids eye contact at the bank. And I've learned to savor the quiet, to find family in the team that greets me by name, in the couples who hug me after their weddings, in the silence that no longer feels like loneliness. But some questions linger in the stillness. When does sacrifice become self-betrayal? Can love exist without respect? And what price would you pay? $1.2 million. $2 million, your dignity, to belong to those who only value your absence when the bill comes due. I don't have answers, only choices. So I ask you, the one reading this, what's your line in the sand? The moment you stop paying in cash, in silence, in pieces of your soul, for a seat at a table where you're never truly seen. I'd love to hear your story.